So we move on to our panel discussion. So we're delighted to be joined by a number of distinguished guests to participate in our panel, where we'll again discuss the biomass topic and expand that to the biochar area with Stephen's involvement in Ireland's sustainable future. So I'll just briefly introduce our panelists. So first we have Pauline O'Reilly. So Pauline is the CEO of the Irish District Energy Association, which represents an emerging district heating sector in Ireland, the Galwegian. She has served as a senator and chair of the Green Party, as well as solicitors. Thanks very much, Pauline, for attending today, and we look forward to hearing your insights. Next up is Barry Caslin. Barry is the Energy and Rural Development Specialist with Teagasc. Barry's role involves advising and supporting farmers in integrating renewable energy, improving energy efficiency, and exploring diversification options and opportunities in rural areas. Barry works on projects ranging from solar PV deployment, microgeneration, anaerobic digestion, and biomass energy to help farmers reduce costs by energy audits and better energy management. And he's also involved in promoting a farm diversification program through fact sheets, training programs, and government support scheme information, helping farmers access new income streams beyond traditional farming. Thanks, Barry, as well, for taking time to join us today. Our next speaker is John Sherlock. So John is Managing Director of Sherlock Warehousing and Trading. John is a founder of that company and also runs Sherlogs Firewood and Sherlogs Craft Timber, which focus on customized sawmilling and craft timber production based in Gainestown near Navan, home to the Sherlock family for 6 generations. He runs a mixed forestry and sheep enterprise, oversees the firewood production business, and which was established in 2013. Prior to that, he was involved in a transport company and other family businesses. John is an active member of, or founder of, the Northeast Forestry Group, and also a member of the Irish Bioenergy Association and the Wood Fuel Quality Assurance Scheme, and sits on our steering committee for the Wood Fuel Quality Assurance Scheme. So again, thanks, John, for joining us today. Dr. John MacNamara is our next speaker or panelist. John is the head of corporate sustainability at B&M, an Irish semi-state company transitioning from a fossil-based operation to a provider of climate solutions. He leads development and implementation of the company's sustainability strategy, focused on low-carbon renewable energy, circular economy, and land use management. John holds a PhD in chemistry and LLB in Irish law and diploma in corporate finance. His career has involved over 2 decades of work in the energy and environmental sectors, with a focus on renewable electricity and resource recovery. Before joining B&M, John served as senior scientist at the EPA and held positions in private environmental sector. So again, thanks, John, for joining us today on the panel. And our last panelist is Stephen McCormack. Stephen is the project executive of the Irish Bioenergy Association. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Energy, Sustainability and Environment from IT Sligo. His focus in IrBEA is on delivering our Interreg Northwest Europe projects. We've delivered a number of those and focused really on the biochar carbon products area, as well as helping us and assisting us on the other works that we are involved in. He also is running the Interreg project called Cascade, Circular Conversion Cascades to Transforming Residual Biomass to Carbon Products, with the project seeing County Donegal serve as a pilot region. And prior to joining IrBEA, Stephen worked with the Western Development Commission as the regional development team. So it's really good to have you all, and thank you for taking the time. So start with you, Pauline. Maybe could you give us an update on your own work in the Irish District Energy Association, and what's the focus at the moment?
Thanks, John. It's great to be here, and we work very closely on the Renewable Energies Association as well. So it's good to see we have members in common as well between IrDEA and IrBEA, with some confusion over the names sometimes. So I guess really I look at it from the point of view of a customer. So a customer, I'll give an example of a hospital. At the moment, all of these customers are looking to decarbonise. We have, as Noel pointed out earlier, over 90% of heat in Ireland is non-renewable, and they're all looking to shift And if you're a hospital at the moment, you're saying, do I get in an air source heat pump? Do I do my own geothermal? Do I look at a biomass boiler? And you're making those decisions. And I suppose where district heating comes into place is, could you also then connect to a network? And that network could be using any of those things. It could be using biomass, it could be using geothermal, it could be using air source heat pumps. But at the moment, we've pretty much none of that in Ireland. We've less than 1%. The target by 2030 is 10%. Ain't going to happen, but it's moving that, it's moving the dial so that there are projects. These projects they can happen within a 3-year period. That's all the way through from planning to the end. But what you haven't had is any money. So you have grant support for all the other types of heating, but no grant support for district heating. And that's really has been a stumbling block. And that, I suppose, is the focus for this year. Delighted, and it's great to see Sean Caslin here, Principal Officer with the Department, who's done great work on this, shown that there are projects, there's a pipeline of projects, things that are ready to go for planning, including some biomass as well. And sorry, I know I'm taking time from everybody else, but yesterday then the Minister did announce that there's a capital budget for district heating and for biomethane. So
yes.
We're both delighted with this announcement yesterday. And then before the end of the year, we're really hopeful that we'll have development funding to get some of these projects off the ground. So that's
and you do need legislation and regulation in order to move the district heating sector forward. Could you just give us an update on what is required and what's in the process at the moment?
So the heat bin is in the pipeline. It was to be done by the end of the year. Latest projections are early next year. That'll have to go through, Joint Rocks Committee for scrutiny. It'll have to go through Shannon and the Dáil. And we're working with the department and with the SAI really, really closely, and the relationship has been great this year over the last few months to push this forward. What kind of licensing is required? CRU would be the regulator. But if you look at something like the UK, where 5 years ago they also had no projects, and now they have about 60 projects that are moving through. They don't have an equivalent to the heat bill. They're doing that now. So it's not as if the legislation and not being in place stops the industry. Both of these things can happen at the same time. Delighted that Sean is doing both for us. And so we see a lot of movement now over the next few months. And indeed, the words from the Minister yesterday were that he wants to concentrate €500 million on new markets for decarbonisation, including biomethane and district heating. So that's the key. It is new. People are wondering what it is, but it's all happening now this year.
And you mentioned specifically about the different fuelling options for the district heating network. So could you just expand on that? Because I know in this room today you have biomethane, you have biomass members and stakeholders who are interested in understanding the opportunity that the district heating system has potentially for those sectors. So
I suppose the big difference between something like electricity and heat, as you all know here, is electricity is one network, it's one grid, and everything is going up and coming down from that one grid. Something like heating, and including district heating, is very much localised. So it's whatever is in the area. And between 50 and 60% of the buildings in Ireland are suitable for district heating. And they can use, it's really any type of heat at all. But we're really, I suppose, fortunate in Ireland, and the industry, including the bioenergy industry, is fortunate that we're not like some of the Eastern European countries which have 80% district heating in some areas, but they're all coming from coal and oil, and they're having to transfer that into something renewable. We're starting from bioenergy and renewables, and those are the things that are going to be supported to get over the line. So it's an opportunity. There are going to be, I suppose, a few developers, both private and some of the councils, that are driving this forward, and they're looking at what's in the area. Does it make sense to do biomass? And it comes down to cash. In the end of the day, does it make sense to do biomass? Does it make sense to do waste heat? Does it make sense to do geothermal or air source? But it's about those connections that people have with the developers as to what's going to be chosen in the end of the day.
And probably specific to the location too.
So more rural locations on the outskirts of towns are going to be more likely to be bioenergy.
And just the last question for now, I suppose, what are your members' immediate needs really in terms of development of the sector? And do you see any connection between, say, what our members require and what your members require in terms of development of the sector?
Well, like if you look at the amount of funding there in the SSRH, and I'm not meant to call it the SSRH, but you know, if you look at that, the amount of funding there, it can't be used for district heating. We're talking about large industrial scale. So if any of your members want to get involved, they can't go that route. So what we really need is a new route, a new type of funding. That's the application that SAI are working on at the moment. It's using this €500 million between ourselves, predominantly our areas, and then putting in place a new grants scheme that would be for CapEx funding. Because if you're putting in like large pieces of infrastructure, like big heat centres could be half the size of this room, and you're putting that into location, you can't expect the hospital to pay for that. Like, the CapEx has to be supported by the government. So that's really what we're looking at.
We'll come back in a second, Pauline. We'll move on to Barry. And I know, Barry, your work is focused really on providing or encouraging the development of local supply chains for biomass supply. So could you just maybe outline your own work at the moment as the Teagasc Energy and Rural Development Specialist, and maybe how that links with the whole area of developing the biomass sector?
Yeah, okay, Sean, and thanks for the invite to be here today. And it's great to see such a young crowd here as well today. I don't know how you manage that. It's good to see it. So my area would be around, I suppose, renewable energy, promoting renewable energy. Teagasc is the Irish Agriculture and Food Development Authority, so we're responsible for agricultural research, advisory and education. We would have 1,200 staff in Teagasc in total right across the country working in different areas. But I suppose over the last number of years, renewable energy and promoting renewable energy has come to the forefront. I suppose farmers can be, producers of renewable energy. They own the land that's going to accommodate wind turbines, solar PV panels. They own the land that's going to grow biomass crops, that's going to produce forestry into the future. So they're key stakeholders in the transition to renewable energy. So I suppose it's to support that transition to renewable energy is where one of my main roles are. I also support entrepreneurship within agriculture, so we have an options program within Teagasc as well, where farmers can come in. Generally, it's around this time of the year it starts. It's called the options program, and they can come in and get educated on different entrepreneurial areas. We link up with the LEOs, local enterprise offices, leader companies, and run courses for farmers on a local basis to promote entrepreneurship. So I suppose in the past, when we refer to this area of biomass, I worked very much around the area of energy crops. It was a promoted area around maybe 2007, 2008. Many farmers grew energy crops around that time. So there was a lot of research about maybe growing those energy crops, looking at best practice guidelines. A lot of my work areas as well would be producing fact sheets around all different types of renewable technologies, maybe solar PV, biogas, all the areas that farmers are inquiring about at the moment. Work a lot with industry and stakeholders who are trying to develop contacts with farmers, maybe work with farmers, work with local groups who are probably trying to develop renewable projects. It could be community projects around renewable energy, or it could be trying to appease maybe some groups as well who are faced with maybe a solar development in their area and maybe explain to them what this technology is about. So it's multifaceted.
You'll be busy, I think, if that's the work you're doing with regard to all the renewable energy development projects, the pipeline.
It can be controversial, but I see it as a great opportunity for farmers as well.
And I suppose speaking of that opportunity, specifically in biomass, so where would you see those opportunities from an agricultural perspective to further deploy these technologies? We heard from SEI that we need to refocus maybe and re-encourage more interest in applications for the SSRH program. So where would you see the opportunities?
I suppose the SSRH has been the game changer in creating demand for biomass. I suppose over 10 years ago there was no SSRH, there was no, I suppose, demand-led policy. There was to create a supply, but a supply started coming on stream and no demand for it. But now we have a demand-led policy through the SSRH. It's fantastic. I suppose, and where are the opportunities? I suppose you can look at all the sectors: the commercial sector, processing, manufacturing. It was mentioned already this morning by Ken about IrBEA here in the food processing industry. They're using wood chip on an annual basis there for their steam and their heat. And we see lots of other industries there, processing and manufacturing that are adopting, biomass heating systems for steam. Probably in the domestic or residential sector as well, there's great opportunity there as well. I think there's over a million homes in the country still using fossil fuels, kerosene. So there's an opportunity for those to change over to the likes of wood pellets. So there's opportunities there as well. And of course, in the agri sector as well, farmers themselves, they have the opportunity of using biomass to supply their own heat. Pig units, poultry units, many of them are already engaging with the SSRH, putting in these biomass boilers. And there's opportunities for farmers then to grow these crops, whether it's the brash or whether it's the forestry, the pulpwood from forestry, or purpose-grown energy crops to meet demand on a local basis, and to create local supply chains. There's opportunity from a rural development perspective. I see great potential there. It's an exciting time.
And just moving away, I know this panel is on biomass, but moving away from that, you've also been a project partner on our farm-scale biogas project, which we've delivered between IrBEA and Teagasc over the last number of years. And Noel presented the slides earlier about the Gildea farm. Do you want to just comment on maybe what you see as the opportunities more broadly for farmers around energy supply and potentially farm-scale biogas production, or indeed more meaningful or mainstream biomethane production as well?
Yeah, most of the talk at the moment is, around large-scale biomethane and larger plants, 40 gigawatt hour, or larger plants, which will need maybe over 100,000 tons of material on an annual basis to keep those digesters fed. And that's fantastic. That's creating an opportunity for farmers to supply maybe grass silage into those biomethane plants across the country. There's an expectation there could be maybe 200 biomethane plants by 2030 in order to meet the targets that we have in the climate action plan. So that's an opportunity for farmers. I don't see farmers owning those plants. Maybe there might be shareholders in some of those plants, but they wouldn't have the cash to inject into building those plants themselves. But maybe at a smaller scale, like what we launched last week on Thursday and Friday in Dunmore in County Galway, it's a fantastic project to be working on. Obviously, lots of challenges in getting those projects over the line, and we've learned all of those issues and challenges, whether it's planning permission, all the regulation that's associated with biogas as well, that you have all those hurdles that you have to jump through. As I was saying last week as well, sometimes it's easier to just go for the bigger plant than the smaller one. The one on that farm in Galway that we looked at was a 49 kilowatt electrical plant, so it's going to meet that farm's electrical requirement. Many farms are already looking at, solar PV and other technologies as well, but that's an organic farm as well, and this was quite interesting from the perspective of in every biogas plant, over 90% of the material that you put into a digester, whether that's and it's 100% slurry on that farm and farmyard manure, but no matter what goes into it, over 90% comes out the other end as digestate. That's a valuable fertilizer to put back onto agricultural land. So that particular farmer is separating out the digestate into, you have the solid fraction, which contains phosphorus and potassium, is the liquid fraction, which is stored in a liquid tank, and that contains nitrogen. So again, valuable fertilizer to put back onto agricultural land. And fertilizer and nutrient management is always a challenge on an organic farm, getting the right nutrient back for growing the grass. He also grows tillage crops as well. Crops, the best thing in the world to show you that your nutrient level is wrong on a crop is to see a tillage crop, a crop of barley or a crop of wheat. If your nutrient levels, your pH levels aren't right, you'll see it straight away in the crops. You might notice it in a grassland crop as easily. So he has that nutrient to target back onto those crops as well as phosphorus, potassium in his solid fraction as well. So it's the first example of a small scale digester, and I know the focus at the moment is around the larger digesters, but I think it has a role to play because we've already established that it's going to save over 200 tons of carbon. That's a conservative estimate. I think if we look at it over 1 year when it's been operating for 1 year, I think we see it'll be much higher carbon savings in terms of the electricity to offset, heat to offset, and the value of the carbon savings in the digestate acting as a fertilizer for the farm as well.
Okay, thanks very much, Barry. If I could just move on to John. And John, I know we visited your business in Navan, and thanks for hosting us, and indeed many of the people in this room over the last a number of different visits we've made there for open days. So can you tell us about your wood fuel business and what you see as the opportunity and for the wood fuel sector, and particularly focusing on, as a forester as well, sustainable forest management, thinning, material, all that type of material in terms of how you utilise that in the woodfield sector.
Thanks very much, Sean. Can everybody hear me?
We can, yeah.
Probably the least qualified up here on the front. So we operate in Navan. This year we do about 3,000 tons of firewood. We don't do any chip yet because it just doesn't fit within what we're doing on the site. We've 50 acres of forestry. So I actually got into firewood to create work for additional availability of people we had within our warehousing business. I've been at it since 2013. Unbelievable help from the WFQA. I'm a member of the North East Forestry Group. It set up in 2013. And it's funny, I have to wear two hats, because when I'm in the North East Forestry Group, I'm trying to get the maximum amount for forest owners for their timber. And then when I go over to my own business, I'm trying to buy my raw product as cheap as I possibly can. So I do tread a very thin line. We buy some of our product from Creature. We buy some of it from, obviously, local forest owners, and we buy some from harvesting companies like Ken there and other companies. I suppose our ethos is that we're buying local product, we're creating the energy, and we're selling it locally. So we would sell within the Leinster area. We also employ four permanent and about another 4 during the summer for bagging firewood on that. We do about 80% of our business is direct to customer. The balance we sell to shops in small bags. It's about the balance we want, because we're not large enough to be able to scale up to produce the small red bags that everybody else can produce. Challenges, I suppose, like any business, the challenge is, first of all, to get the customers. And when you have the customers, is to keep the supply of raw material in. And up until this year, we've had a challenge in being able to get raw material, i.e. pulpwood, because there was a good lot of pulpwood being exported. I know within the firewood community, we work within the WFQA group, and it's been great too as a networking vehicle. We have struggled to get supply. Now with this year's storms, obviously, there's an oversupply. But I'm just looking at the questions Sean proposed. If you look at the wood fuel energy sector in Ireland, if you look at the price of pulp, which as a forest owner I look at, before the firewood wood fuel sector started really getting going, was quite low. So as a forest owner now, up until the storm, we would have been getting around about €25 a tonne or a cubic metre for our pulp standing as a forest owner. Now at the moment, due to the oversupply on the market, that price has dropped to, one forest owner I heard was offered €3 a cubic metre tonne for his product. So you can imagine if we didn't have the wood fuel business going in Ireland, with all the timber now coming from the private sector, it can't all be exported. We see what's happening now within the industry at the minute with the oversupply of sawlog. The sawlog has been stuffed into containers now and sent to China, because the level of price has gone to that level now that it's economic to shove it into a container and sell it in China. That's where I see the wood fuel sector.
Okay. And you have to plan ahead, you have to get stock in. Can you explain the process that you go through on your site?
Yeah,
because a lot of people wouldn't understand anything associated with this.
Yeah, so basically we'd have a raw material bought and paid for and stacked for drying for a year before we process it. So, I don't know, originally I think the firewood business must have had a horrible bad name, because when I started, no one would give us any firewood unless we paid for it, and that has continued through. So it must have been a rogues and charlatans at the start, but I'd hope to think that our industry has changed. So we'd buy our timber and have it there for a year in stacks.
And sorry, John, just by timber you're buying
Pulp.
You're not competing with construction timber.
No.
It's very clear to point
So
out
we're
that.
buying, so if you can imagine, I don't know, you all probably understand the whole theory of forestry. So a hectare of forestry will grow X amount of timber per year. So that means it'll either grow a couple of thousand trees that size or a couple of hundred trees that size. So what you try and do is you plant early, get the trees growing up, that they're nice and straight, and then when they're up, you take out the ones surrounding. You take out the poor performing trees. But they're not suitable for pallets, they're not suitable for only pulp, which up until the firewood sector, they went for chipboard. So we're buying the waste basically from the forest owner. And if you look at a forest owner, he was getting nothing for his pulp before the firewood biomass start. So we're there actually taking the timber that no one else wants and we're converting it into an energy that's local.
I interrupt you then in terms of your process on the site, what you go through.
So we buy this pulpwood and we stack it and we dry it. Then we process it and then we put it into polytunnels. So when we're putting it into a polytunnel, we generally have it down to about 25%. Then we put it into the polytunnels for about 6 months, sometimes 3 months depending on the moisture. We'll get it down to about 17-18% there, possibly lower, but 17% is what we average.
And why polytunnels?
Sorry?
Why polytunnels? Why do you use polytunnels?
The way I looked at it was, we looked at kilns, but to put timber through a kiln, you have to use a lot of energy to heat up the timber, to get that moisture through, to get that air through. So what we looked at was, if we had the product and we just were prepared to put enough, lucky enough our site had space for polytunnels. So we have big polytunnels that'll hold 250 pallets. And the wind comes through them, the heat comes through them. So all you're really buying is the initial structure. And the difference in it and a shed is you're getting the sunlight in. And even on the coldest days, if you walk into that polytunnel, there is an element of heat, but you also need the airflow to get the moisture out when it comes out of the timber. So then before we sell it, we weigh every pallet. Because initially we were doing moisture meter tests, and we also do oven tests. We do a certain amount as well. But if you look at a pallet of timber and you stick a moisture meter in the outside piece of timber, it's going to be dry, obviously. But how many times is somebody going to, when they're loading a lorry, to put 15, 20 pallets on it in the middle of the winter and it's raining on them, are they going to get off a forklift and get down into the middle of a pallet? Let's be honest, they're not. So what we did was we did a lot of measuring and calculating on the volume of the pallet, type of timber, and if it was below 17% or 70% what it weighed. So we have an electronic scales now, so we weigh every pallet before it was on the truck. And that's our metric, along with moisture meters, for making sure that the product is sold out. And if the thing about it is, if it's over that weight, it's just a matter of sticking it back in the polytunnel and it'll come back out 2 or 3 months. We're not losing the product.
And can you explain why there's a focus on moisture and just maybe how that ties back to the solid fuel regulations?
Yeah, well, the challenge I think you have as any producer is, so if you look at firewood, it's like a lot of other products, you're basically looking at repeat business. So the hardest thing you do is to get that initial customer. So if you get that initial customer and you promise them A, B, C, D, as long as you keep that contract that you've made with that customer, they will keep coming to you. So it's not always price. There is certain people who go for price, but they'll always flit around anyway. But if you look at the general public now who have stoves, initially you could sell them a lump of gravel and they'd throw it in the stove. But now they've all become a lot more aware of moisture. They've become aware of quality. They've become aware of how much heat, either softwood or hardwood. So they understand a lot more that they're selling in a ton bag. And this thing about a ton bag, I used to say, are you buying a ton bag of feathers or a ton bag of sand? You know what I mean? But Now they're all aware of volume, so they've become a lot, what I would say, cuter in what they're buying and aware of what they're buying. So the fact that we have a verifiable quality mark within the WFQA, that sort of brings them to us. So it's up, our contract then is to keep them, so you keep them by making sure you have dry timber. That way then when the man comes to clean their stove, he's not saying, where did all this shit come from in the flue? Why are the windows getting clogged up? Like, they're not stupid. After a while, people figure all this out.
And you're working to the solid fuel regulation 25% at the moment, but you're achieving a lot lower than that.
Well, from our conversations within the group, we realised, and engagement with the EPA, realised that 25% I think is only a stopgap, really. 20% is where we need to be at. Because the difference in heat coming from a piece of timber at 25% and under 20 is just completely different. And I know our customers have got used to buying under 20%. And I know if we sold them firewood up to 25%, they would know. They know. So I think that's where we need to go. The other thing too is if you look at air quality, and at the minute, one of our challenges, I think, going forward is going to be air quality, because the biomass industry is getting a lot of bad press about air quality. And I think a lot of it is unjustified, because you can say anything about something if you can't verify it.
Okay, thanks very much, John. Move on to the other John next to you, and could you give us an outline, John, of your role and maybe the B&M portfolio that's being developed and maybe how that links back to the whole bioenergy sector?
Thanks, Sean. Great to be here today. Been an attendee for the last couple of years. Barry said it's great to see the momentum that's here today, and feeling a wee bit old up on the stage here today as well. So my background, as you kindly introduced me, is in combustion chemistry, and I suppose I'd have worked particularly in B&M on the Eden Dairy or Eden Dairy Power Limited, EPL, and referred to during the course of the discussion. And it's important to realise that since the Turf Development Act, B&M, or Móna, rebranded as B&M, has always been an energy company and always been sort of focused on indigenous industry in Ireland. Admittedly, for the first sort of stage of our operations, it was peat in the peatlands. More recently, there's been a complete pivot away from peat into renewable energy. I suppose my role, and I'll come back to that in a moment, my role as sustainability, corporate sustainability, is a little bit broader than that. It's making sure that we align our sort of corporate strategy with good principles of sustainability and good governance all the way through the organisation, from development, from procurement, from circular economy, and all facets of the operations of business, put sustainability into the mix. As I said, we've pivoted from what we might call fossil energy into renewable energy. And again, one of the discussions I think earlier on this morning, we've heard that there's no one single silver bullet for energy security or energy delivery. We would obviously have a massive land bank across the country, about 80,000 hectares, usually in quite isolated locations. So our sort of, the workhorse of our new renewable energy would be onshore wind, okay? But we're supplementing that with the ancillaries of, say, batteries on the sites. We're also looking at solar energy, or Timahoe North, the JV with ESB open during the summer. And then obviously looking further afield, maybe it's a longer term horizon at offshore. And then we have the likes of Eden Dairy in terms of biomass. And the Eden Dairy plant is, in some respects, like a microcosm of how Borden and Móna have transitioned over the last while. When that was built, and rather ironically, and we're seeing things go full circle, that had European support for security of supply. Okay, back in the early noughties, it was peat only. Okay, firing on peat. It was an independent power station, one of the first in the country, and Borden or B&M were supplying peat to that site. We subsequently purchased that site, and from about 2007, 2008 on, we started experimenting with the mix and beginning to sort of look at biomass as a potential feedstock. And the first year we were talking a couple of truckloads essentially to see if the plant didn't explode.
And can you outline just for us the strategic importance of Eden Dairy Power in the context of our overall electricity system?
So, I mean, the station itself is around 120 megawatt hours, so it's not the biggest plant on the system. However, on the island of Ireland, it's the largest single dispatchable renewable plant. So at the moment, we're 100% sustainable biomass, the vast majority of which is sourced from indigenous supplies. But the power is available to the grid and to the Irish consumer, the Irish electricity consumer, whenever they need it. It's not dependent on the wind blowing or the sun shining or batteries being fully charged. It's available there to deliver. Yeah. And the additional benefit that's there, it's not just the physical electricity that flows from the plant, it's also the ancillary services, the likes of the inertia, the physical inertia that its rotating mass has that provides stability, the voltage support. And if you remember back earlier on this year, that cascading power or power collapse in the Iberian Peninsula, that was from, dare I say, the absence or not enough inertia, not enough voltage control on that grid system that led to those pretty devastating and impactful power cuts that happened in Spain and Portugal. And I suppose the role of Eden Dairy is, as I said, it benefits, from a feedstock, the forestry sector and the timber sector. Like what John mentioned, we're not looking for, dare I say, the fillet of the saw log. We're quite happy with the lower value pulp material. I mean, in fairness to Joe and Sean, they've expanded the sort of both the footprint by developing sort of satellite sites close to where hedgerows and brash are were taken, and where there's pulpwood, and sort of consolidating those loads and taking them to the plant. Secondly, as I said, there's a huge benefit to the Irish electricity consumer. There's a benefit to IrGrid in terms of these ancillary services that's there. And then to Ireland Inc., you have the benefit of the renewable electricity and greenhouse gas reduction.
Okay. And just finally for you, John, I know you're all have interest in biomethane. Very briefly, can you just maybe tell us about those?
So we have a biomethane plant under development. Unfortunately, the planning system and the wider legal system has that plant caught up in a JR at the moment.
Yeah.
But look,
you're getting there.
We're getting there, and I think to say there's a challenge in planning, there's a challenge in grid in the country, and it's not new news, but I'm a little bit more hopeful than I was a couple of years ago.
Okay. Thanks very much, John. If I can move on to Stephen, I know we're under pressure for time, so it'll be rapid fire for you, Stephen, okay. And I think you'd like that. Can you just explain a bit about biochar? I know that's a key area for the organisation and your own work in that.
Yep, so I suppose Noel went through the basics about it, but I'll just refresh. So essentially biochar is a type of charcoal that's made from any sort of biomass, ideally sustainably sourced, and basically is converted into a solid form of carbon, which can be anywhere above 50 or 60% solid carbon that remains stable. So that means it doesn't get broken down, it doesn't get eaten by microbes, so it'll persist in the environment. What that means, it's one of the most effective ways we have of locking up atmospheric carbon. Noel rightly referred to it as a negative emissions technology, which is not something that applies to most renewable energy technologies. It's not something we hear talked about that often. But if you were to imagine taking a recently sourced biomass and converting it into this form of charcoal, there you are. First of all, you're producing a carbon sink, so locking up atmospheric carbon. But what if you were to take it one step further and use the heat that can be generated in the process, and maybe use that to offset a fossil fuel use or even to integrate into a heat network, then you're providing carbon negative heat, and that's what it means by negative emissions technology.
So you might be able to work with Pauline's members in terms of district
We've
heating
visited a
from
number
that.
of reference sites across Europe where they have pyrolysis, so they're producing biochar, which they sell as a valuable product to farmers and other customers. They're producing carbon credits because they've done their due diligence, and so they're trading carbon credits in the voluntary carbon removal market. They're providing baseload heat for district heating networks, and in some instances they're also producing electricity. So there's a lot of positives there from one particular.
And just can you
process.
explain, Stephen, just the IrBEA Interreg journey very briefly, what we've been involved in over the last number of years on the Interreg project?
Absolutely. So look, we've been fortunate enough. This is our third successive Interreg Northwest Europe funded project over the last decade. The project poster for our current one is Cascade. That runs until next year. We have another few applications in the pipeline as well. Hopefully that'll work out. But the Cascade project at the moment, we're focusing on place-based local circular carbon systems, and we're lucky to work with the pilot region of Donegal and Calulta, which is a social enterprise, our associated partners. They're here in the room today, and they grow under organic principles, and what they're doing is they're taking biochar produced in IrBEA, and they're combining it with their own sources of nutrients which they're producing themselves, so from comfrey and from seaweed and from nettles, with a view to boosting their crop yields. So they sell organic produce to local restaurants, supermarkets and food vendors. And they've had great success in terms of up to 20-25% increase in yields on a variety of crops. So that's what we're working at the moment. Our project partners across Europe are looking at other aspects, so we're focusing on agricultural and horticultural applications. Our project partners at the University of Caslin in Germany, they're looking at activated carbon replacement. So they're actually working with grassy fibrous feedstocks, and they're able to produce an activated carbon for use in wastewater treatment that's as effective as commercially available fossil-derived activated carbon. Université de La Salle in France is one of our other partners, and they're doing a lot of work into incorporating biochar into sports pitches, into suds and drainage networks along streets to help with infiltration and treatment of the water as it runs off. There's a whole wide variety of applications currently being explored.
And just where can people find out more about biochar if you wanted to refer them to?
Well, there's a good few experts in the room, some with better expertise than myself, so I'd encourage you to seek them out first and foremost. Obviously, come and chat to me afterwards. On our website, on our YouTube channel, we have a few explainer videos, and we have a fact sheet over there as well, so absolutely encourage you to dig into it further if it's a topic you find interesting.
Okay, thanks very much, Stephen, and we've run over time on the panel, so we don't have time to go back and ask for further input from our panelists, but I'd like you to show your appreciation for all our panel. So